Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Today, I wish I had better news. We have had our commie governor in New Mexico has went out and banned, well, let me rephrase this, used the state of emergency powers that we gave her during the stuff with COVID, the emergency with COVID, to declare a public health emergency for firearms deaths. This following after a couple of gang violence incidents in Albuquerque, New Mexico that tragically killed some young people. Her reaction was swift, I guess you could say. She chose to do this on a Friday, late in the afternoon, to go ahead and try to surf under the radar, because in the news, that is, anything that happens on a Friday goes there to die. That's what she's hoping to do here, but we can't let this die. What she's effectively done, I'm going to play the clip from MLG News, from their Twitter specifically, and pardon me while I get that ready.
But your point is valid. You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carrying license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath to uphold those too. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subrogated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
Wait a minute. You're talking about crimes. There are already laws against the crimes, so how are their rights?
But again, if I'm unsafe, who's standing up for that right? If this climate is so out of control, somebody should do something. I'm doing as much as I know to do.
Madam Governor, do you really think that criminals are going to hear this message and not carry a gun in Albuquerque on the streets for 30 days?
No. But here's what I do think. It's a pretty resounding message.
So as you can see, the governor doesn't care. What has basically happened here is the governor is subverting our constitutional rights, not just our national constitutional rights, but our actual New Mexico constitutional rights. Now, in the news, what's weird about this is it's tied to population, and it's tied to this executive order that she put out. So it's not a law, it's an executive order. This was not passed through New Mexico's roundhouse through either side of the aisle. The governor took executive action here to try to ban you from carrying a gun peacefully in one of the worst crime-ridden cities in the state. Now, there are multiple levels. As you can tell, I'm a little frustrated and honestly a little pissed off. I was debating on doing this last night, this podcast going live right after I found it, and I think I needed to cool down a little bit to get more collected and to actually think about this a little more. Now, San Juan County Sheriff's, Northwest New Mexico, Shane Ferrari is our sheriff up here. He's also the chairman of the New Mexico Sheriff's Foundation. He came out with a statement reflecting for the Sheriff's Association that condemns this. It's a little light, in my opinion, but nonetheless, it's condemning it. You have to understand, again, as much as I love the Sheriff's Association and the sheriff in general, especially this one, they have to be a little bit more political than I am, meaning they have to be able to deal and work with the governor where I don't. Our governor will not listen to us, civilians, period. But hopefully someone like Shane actually has a little more stroke. In his statement, he basically said it's tragic that they went after guns, disarming the basic civilians law-abiding citizens, without addressing the real problem. The real problem here is a drug violence. This was a drug violent act, meaning that this was a gang violent act. And that rather than addressing those or addressing the issue we have with New Mexico's border and those drugs coming into the United States or into New Mexico specifically, she chose to go after guns because this was, he didn't say this, I'm saying this, that it was a political stunt to get political brownie points. Make no mistake, if they're trying this in New Mexico, this will go nationwide. Any of the other number of the left-leaning uber blue behind the blue wall states, like Gavin Newsom, they will try to do this if this skates and gets away. Now, there's already talk from FPC and GOA and everybody else to go after her because this is blatantly unconstitutional. Not just the federal constitution, but against New Mexico constitution. And as you heard in that statement, she doesn't care. She literally says there, I will, at the end of the speech, she says, I will literally run over rights because the right you have doesn't subvert someone else's right. And while that's right on the surface, that doesn't mean you curtail rights, period. And that's what she's doing here. Later today, I'll be posting up some stuff that I'm working on right now for my Rumble channel. So it's 505BROU if you're interested in seeing the video version of this. I didn't attach the video. A lot of times I rip off the video, the audio, and just upload it. But in this case, I think it warrants having another discussion or another set of time for me to go ahead and address this on video. But what they're saying is, and if you don't understand what's going on, they've banned concealed carry and open carry. Concealed carry you have to do in New Mexico, you have to have a permit to conceal carry. So she's canceling that for 30 days in Bernalillo County. Add that New Mexico is an open carry state. You do not, by law, have to have a permit to carry anything up to an AR-15 on your person while you're walking down the street. You may be approached by law enforcement. You may have to answer who you are and identify who you are. But no law was broken and no crime was committed, and they'll usually send you about your way. This has happened several times. I listen to the radio, the police scanner all the time in northwest New Mexico, and there's a lot of people that get reported for carrying a gun openly, and the law enforcement in general is like, there's no crime committed here. We'll go report. We'll make those people feel good because we're there, but there's no crime committed here. Now, what does this mean? I know of a lot of people there in Albuquerque. I was supposed to go down and help them protest, but as I'm looking for a job and I'm trying to save some funds, I can't justify going to Albuquerque even for this protest. What I know is going to happen is these folks are going to go in a very public place and sit open carry, and they're expecting to be accosted by state PD. Now, it's interesting that Bernalillo County Sheriff has come out and said, we can't really enforce this. There's some constitutional problems here. Well, duh. More interesting is Albuquerque PD. Their chief has come out and said that we cannot enforce this because we're already under federal guidelines on what we can and can't enforce, period. And that there would be constitutional repercussions from this. With the Sheriff's Association, that is the supreme law of the land, meaning that in every county there's a sheriff, and that is the guy that they have to get approval. The feds even have to get approval to have to come into that county to exercise a warrant. And them coming out and saying they are not in support of this. That means that they're probably not going to enforce this law either, or this edict. It's not a law, it's an edict. It is a executive order. That leaves it to New Mexico State Police. Now, New Mexico State Police were the ones that came and shut down every one of the shops that were open and restaurants and any business that was open during the COVID mandates. And I harp on this all the time about the COVID mandates in New Mexico because up until very recently, and it took the last session of our roundhouse, which is our House and Senate, to get to get it reversed to where it was actually the emergency COVID executive order was removed. They did not strip her of her emergency powers, though. That's why she's getting away with this, at least for now. So, do I believe New Mexico State Police will actually enforce this? I absolutely do, because they're the ones that went into my prime example is Sportsman's Warehouse, where they in northwest New Mexico, where they shut down the place. Later, it was determined that the governor did not have the power to shut down something like Sportsman's Warehouse or gun stores, because you cannot, even during an emergency, you cannot strip away rights of American citizens. Mark Smith, who is check him out on YouTube. He hosts the Four Boxes Diner. He's a lawyer, okay, and he's a legal scholar. He has a very succinct sum up of what we can do. A lot of that is tied to the Bruin decision, which means that they cannot repeal or they cannot pull our rights away by executive fiat. William Kirk from Washington Gun Law, he went off on this for a little bit today too, also echoing much of what the same things that Mark Smith had said. So there are going to be legal challenges. And as you heard in that press conference, this was from KOAT or KOB4, I'm sorry, but AMOLAN posted the video up for it. They were even, the press was even asking them, this is mainstream New Mexican press that was asking them, hey, this is blatantly unconstitutional. How are you getting away with this? Or how do you think you're going to get away with this? The short answer is she can't. And we need to be very vocal. We need to start calling our state reps, our federal reps, and we need to start getting ready to fight the legal battle. You know, I often say we're winning a lot of the time, and this is a reflection of that. Her frustration is that she could not pass a lot of these laws that she was wanting to do through the roundhouse. So she's now using executive power in her mind to get that end result that she's looking for. Disarming average people, though, doesn't disarm criminals, as they just said in that press conference, which is echoed by everyone, including some of my more hippie friends that understand there is nothing you can do to stop people from breaking the law. If they're going to break the law keeps people like myself, like you, in line, because we are not criminals. Criminals don't care. All this is going to do is strip the rights of normal civilians, normal citizens, from being able to defend themselves in Albuquerque proper. Now, I think that anybody done up or arrested by New Mexico State PD is going to get off scot-free with this, and they're going to end up owning a good chunk of New Mexico financially for doing this, because this will not stand. I don't think that, I don't know, I say this and then I worry about it in today's day and age with the courts citing so much, or the Department of Justice citing so much with Joe Biden on a lot of things, and them arresting some people. This is what started our first Revolutionary War. Removing firearms from citizens is what King George tried to do in Boston after the massacre, or before the massacre, that ended up sparking the revolution. And I fully expect that she's going to continue this as long as she can. I mean, we lived under the COVID stuff for 3 years until finally someone in the roundhouse got enough votes to strip her of her power. Now, in the blogosphere, in the social media spaces and Twitter, there's people like Dan Bongino, great guy. There's things like Graham Allen, who's also a great guy. They were asking, and James Lindsay, we need to strip this lady of her power. We need to put her behind bars. We want to remove her from power. Well, we've tried that. The 2A guys, when the red flag stuff happened in 2017, we tried to do that. We got enough signatures to do it, to go and impeach her, and we couldn't get it done because we have to have the approval of the Speaker of the House, who is directly under her thumb, or was at the time, and probably still is. when it comes to state power, state executive order, state power in general for the governor's office, the governor in New Mexico is pretty much untouchable unless the people rise up enough to make it uncomfortable for the representatives of the House and the Senate to actually go and do something about it. It's time to light up the boards again and make them all pay. Make them have to answer and call and answer the calls and come forward and stand up for us. Because this is a blatant act of war against civilians. She's saying that, and she's using a goon force, the New Mexico State PD. Now, there's a lot of good New Mexico State PD guys. I'm no longer a back the blue dude after the COVID stuff. I'm guessing they retired by now, or they left for another force like San Juan County Sheriffs, because they knew what they were doing is wrong. But if you have been paying attention to the federal happenings in the United States right now, you know that there's a lot of cops that are there just in New Mexico State PD that are just there to collect a paycheck. And they absolutely will enforce this because she said it's so. That's not how the United States works. That's not how any state in our union works. But in New Mexico, she has her own Gestapo force called New Mexico State PD. So, call to action. First thing, call your reps in New Mexico, the local reps. Make it noisy, because that's what's going to get this changed. Second, if you're in Bernalillo County, peacefully and politely protest however you see fit. Okay? You need to understand something here. In New Mexico, during the last roundhouse session, cops in general had qualified immunity stripped from them. If they arrest you, you have legal course to go after them individually, not just the force. Do so. When you engage your legal rights and you engage your legal representative, meaning your lawyer, and they're starting to put those cases together, you need to go after not only the department, not only the state, you need to go after the cop. Why? Because it's time to tell every one of those law enforcement agents that are willing to comply with this type of action that we've had enough. And we're going to do this peacefully for now. But if you keep pressing, there's going to be repercussions. I guarantee you this. I'm not calling for violence. I just know that New Mexicans and the United States citizens have finally gotten to that breaking point, and this is going to push that last twig or push that last brick over the wall, and it's going to come tumbling down. Like, share, subscribe, be great.
In the top, I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that? I ain't catching all slack, and I have enemies on my ball sack. I'm thinking insanity's what you call that, and I just get a